Tonight, Hamilton County is facing a federal lawsuit over the sexual acts of an employee who worked in its morgue.
Now, you expect that the bodies of murder victims entrusted to the coroner's office for autopsy would be safe and protected.
But there's a former employee who's in jail right now for sexually abusing corpses. And now, years later, the families of the victims want relief. We have exclusive video to show you given to us by the victim's lawyer, who claims the county ignored numerous warning signs. And we want to warn you, some of it is quite graphic.
It's like a zombie. You just don't have no feeling, just don't know what to do.
James Appling is talking about his murdered daughter. But what made him feel that way is what happened to her and at least 2 other women after they were killed.
I do remember going in the freezer, pulling in one of the rooms in the back.
Okay.
Yeah.
What happened?
I had sex with her.
Kenneth Douglas admitted to sexually assaulting Appling's daughter Charlene, Angel Hicks, and Karen Range during his time at the morgue in the 80s.
I would just get on top of him and pull my pants down.
These crimes did not come to light until years later. It was not until 2008 that DNA from the victims was linked to Kenneth Douglas. He was indicted, pleaded guilty, and was sentenced to 3 years in prison. But even then, Hamilton County had a hard time explaining it.
No one could have imagined this.
Douglas's wife claims she called the morgue supervisor about her husband smelling like alcohol and
I told him, I said, we're down to 1 car. More often than not, I'm dropping Kenny off and I'm picking him up. And I'm taking him home. He gets undressed and he reaps up.
Appling's attorney put it in terms that we can use on TV.
Her husband was also coming home from work, as she put it, smelling like sex.
Douglas's wife claims the morgue supervisor told her to stop calling.
Bertie said, Pat, whatever happens on county property and county time is county business.
Douglas says he committed these crimes because he was under the influence of drugs and alcohol on the job.
If I wasn't drinking, I hadn't had anything to drink when I went to work, it wouldn't happen. Or I would do crack and go in, and I would drink and go in.
And even he isn't sure how many corpses he abused.
But it could be as many as 20.
It could be 100.
One of the family's attorneys, Al Gerhardstein, says that the county ignored the warning signs.
The county had plenty of notice that Douglas was coming to work and was present at work while he was under the influence of alcohol. Turns out he was also taking drugs. And he told us in deposition, I wouldn't have done any of this if it hadn't been for the alcohol and drugs. So had he been stopped, these women would not have been abused.
The families of the 3 victims are suing Hamilton County because their loved ones' bodies were in the custody of the morgue.
This is a time when you really do expect that the county will hold your loved ones safely. And here this additional abuse happened on the county's watch by a county employee. And that's just terrible.
It wasn't only corpses. A morgue employee who worked with Douglas testified that he would bring live women in at night and have sex with them. This is the 4th time the county has been sued for failing to protect bodies in the morgue. The county could have another multi-million-dollar lawsuit on its hands. We reached out to the county for comment, and they sent us a statement that says Hamilton County, like any other employer, is not and should not be responsible for the criminal acts of an employee. The taxpayers should not have to pay any money for the acts committed by criminals.
Some of this was pretty difficult to listen to.
More than 1,000 Hamilton County families must wait to bury their loved ones until the Hamilton County coroner has determined a cause of death. This includes mothers who die in car accidents and sisters and daughters who die in homicides. While those families wait for the burial, their loved one is held at the Hamilton County morgue on the 1st floor of the coroner's office. This case involves atrocities that span 10 years at the morgue, the rape of several deceased women by a morgue attendant, Kenneth Douglas. 3 families brought this action. First, the family of Karen Range. Second, the family of Charlene Appling. And third, the family of Angel Hicks. Their loved ones were each raped by Ken Douglas while he was on duty as a morgue attendant at the Hamilton County morgue. Ken Douglas was an alcoholic and drug addict. He comes from a family of alcoholics.
Anything remarkable about growing up
Did you go to school? Did you live with your mom and dad?
Yeah, I went to school, and Mom and Dad was alcoholics, and I moved to Cincinnati with my father's brother.
Any of those brothers and sisters have any trouble with alcoholism?
Yes.
How many?
At least 5 of them that I can think of, yes.
And has it been such a problem for them that they've had trouble in their marriages?
Yes.
Have they had trouble on their jobs?
Yes.
Have any of them had trouble with the law?
Yes.
Ken Douglas was supervised at the morgue by Bernie Kursker, Carol Maratea, and coroner Dr. Frank Cleveland. Douglas had access to the bodies at the morgue every day from 1976 until 1992. Douglas raped the women at the morgue while he was drunk and high. As of the time you abused the body of Karen Range, would you say that you were already into this period of using alcohol to excess and using marijuana to excess?
Yes.
Would you ever, drink before you went to work?
I have.
All right. And would you smoke marijuana before you went to work?
I have.
Karen Range grew up in Cincinnati with her mother and several siblings. She enjoyed animals and was planning to go to veterinary school. She was proud of her virginity, abstaining from sex until she would be married. Karen was murdered by a door-to-door salesman on October 19, 1982. She was only 19 years old. Karen was admitted to the morgue on August 20th, 1982. Karen was the 1,020th person admitted to the morgue that year. Her family viewed her at the morgue in the viewing room. Karen was in the custody of morgue attendant Ken Douglas. Karen was raped by Ken Douglas while she was in the morgue. Here is what he told the police.
I signed her hand and bagged her hand and all of that, and I believe she was dressed like that. I'm not for sure if she was in a body pouch or was she wrapped up in a blanket. I really can't say, but I do remember going in the freezer, pulling in one of the rooms in the back.
Okay. What happened?
I had sex with her.
Did you ever have to unzip body bags to see the women?
A few of them.
Okay, some of them?
A few of them.
Okay.
I think Karen was one of them.
Okay.
The first one.
Right.
And I remember talking to you about Karen Range, where you said that you pulled her out, you got up on the gurney and had sex with her. Mm-hmm. Would this be the mode you used to get up on the gurney? And
That only happened a couple of times.
where you would actually...
The other times, I can't actually remember, but I do remember sometimes I wouldn't. I would just masturbate. Right?
Well,
and I would have my hands on her.
Charlene Appling and her two sisters were raised by their father in Cincinnati. Their mother died when Charlene was 10 years old. At the time of her death, Charlene Appling had a 4-year-old son, Mishael, and she was 6 months pregnant with her second child. Ken Douglas checked Charlene into the morgue. Charlene's father, James, went to the morgue to identify his daughter. He thought she would be protected at the morgue.
I went to the same morgue and the same window that identified my daughter's body that did my wife's body. She was in the morgue, and it's no way we can get close to them because there's a window there. We just look through the window. That's all you can do. That's all you can do. We just thought that once people were, were respectful, and also you could trust them. You can't explain the hurt. You can't explain the hurt. It's like a zombie. You just don't have no feeling, just don't know what to do. I thought that she would be well protected and taken care of her and respected.
DNA testing positively identifies Charlene as one of Ken Douglas's victims. Angel Hicks grew up in a tight-knit family with her 2 older sisters and her younger brother. Angel was killed on December 8, 1991. At the time, she was a 24-year-old mother of 2 young children. Ken Douglas checked Angel into the morgue. Mom, Mary Bryant, remembers Ken Douglas standing next to her daughter in the viewing room.
Looking at this picture, I probably did it.
What's that?
I probably scared. I probably had misuse. Yeah.
Do you think you may have with her?
Yes, yes.
And why do you think that?
The big booze.
Okay.
You like booze?
Is that
I
something?
like booze, yeah. When I got drunk, I like big booze.
Kenneth Douglas would actually get up on the gurneys to abuse these women.
I mean, you, I guess, just pulled yourself up on the gurney. Would you have to, how would you do that? I'm just curious. I mean, because they're on the gurney. I mean, would you have to kneel in front of them or open their legs up or?
I would just get on top of them, pull my pants down. But I said a lot of times, I wouldn't climb up on top of the body. I would just put my hands on them and masturbate. A lot of times. That was quite a few times. I can't put a number on it, but
it was a high number.
It was a high number, right.
Karen, Charlene, and Angel are not the only women molested by Douglas.
See, there's evidence we can prove, and there's some that's evidence is shoddy, but we know that number is certainly greater than 10. And that's why I wanted to come back to you with that. What do you think, Ken? 20?
Maybe 20. I can't really say. I'm saying here saying a number. I can't really say.
It's
I'm going to leave it
though.
like that.
Okay.
I'm going to leave it just like that. I can't really say.
But it could be as many as 20.
It could be 100.
The signs that Ken Douglas was an alcoholic appeared early and were present throughout his career at the morgue. His drinking caused him to be late and to miss work on many occasions. He discussed this with his supervisor, Bernie Kursker.
When would you talk to Mr. Kursker about your treatment and things like that? Would that be at lunch, or did you have private conversations with him?
I would usually go to his office in private and talk to him.
And of course, they keep records at the morgue on attendance and tardiness, right?
Right.
And he did talk to you about your use of sick time and your tardy time when he would give you your performance evaluations, right?
That was a big problem I was having.
And he noted that on your
Right.
performance evaluations, right?
Right.
And he knew that the problem of not getting to work on time and missing some days was due to your efforts was due to your alcoholism.
Right.
Kursker noted the attendance problems on Douglas's performance evaluations as early as 1980, when he rated Ken Douglas low for dependability, stating, "Kenneth has had problems over the past year which affected his dependability and interest in the job." The problem continued, and Kursker noted on the 1984 evaluation that Ken had a chronic tardy problem over the years. I also cautioned Ken about a misuse of sick time. The problem got worse. In 1990, Ken Douglas used 25 sick days, nearly one every other week, and was only cautioned. In 1991, the year he raped Angel and Charlene, Ken Douglas used 23 sick days, and again was only cautioned. In fact, Dr. Cleveland even signed off on a raise for Ken Douglas. Pat Chavis was married to Ken Douglas. She warned both Kursker and Maratea that Ken Douglas was drinking at work and that he came home smelling like sex. So you called Bernie Kursker in '87.
Yep.
And tell me, as best you can recall, exactly what you told him.
I told Bernie, I said, Bernie, I think that Kenny's having some problems. And he said, what do you mean, Pat? And I said, Kenny's coming home, straight from work, and he's smelling like booze. And he said, well, what do you mean smelling like? I said, he smells like he's been drinking. He said, well, maybe he's stopping off. I said, Bernie, I called him at work, and he came straight home. It took him 15 minutes. I called the morgue. It took him 15 minutes to get home, and he smelled like booze. Unless he had something in the car, then he was drinking there. And he was too intoxicated to get drunk that fast. And Bernie said, you know what, Pat, I'll look into it.
How long had it been going on by the time you called, Mr. Cruz?
By the time I called Bernie, it had been well over a year. But it wasn't happening every week. It wasn't happening every month. It was periodically.
Bernie Kursker did not do anything after this warning, so Pat Chavis called Bernie again. Did you tell Mr. Kursker on the second time you called him about the drinking?
Yes.
What did you say?
I told him, I said, he's still drinking. You told me you would talk to him, and you haven't. I said, because I've asked Kenny, and Kenny said to stay out of his business. So I'm calling you, and I'm telling you, the drinking hasn't stopped. I said, but the thing that is really gotten me bothered right now, and I said, is he's coming home smelling like sex.
So that's what you told Mr. Kursker?
Yeah.
That Mr. Douglas was coming home smelling like sex?
Yes.
And what did Mr. Kursker say?
He said, why do you think he's coming home smelling like sex? And I told him, I said, we're down to one car. More often than not, I'm dropping Kenny off and I'm picking him up. And I'm taking him home. He gets undressed and he reeks of pussy. I'm sorry, excuse me. And that's the way I said it. And Bertie said, Pat, whatever happens on county property and county time is county business. You're an insecure, jealous wife, and I don't want you to call here anymore. And he hung up on me.
Kursker admitted talking to Pat Chavis and admitted telling her not to call back, but claimed not to remember any more about their conversations.
I'm trying to remember. Pat called. I know that. I remember that name, Pat. But I don't remember. No, I don't remember ever saying anything about his drinking. She wanted to get a hold of him, tell that so-and-so to call me and this and that. And I'd say, look, don't call here anymore. But that's just what it was all about. I never got into his personal life.
Pat Chavis also warned Carol Maratea about Douglas having sex at the morgue.
The next day I called Carol. I said, your secretary is calling my house. I said, I know that Kenny's having relationships. And I know that he comes home smelling like sex. I said, I don't know if it's your secretary or not. I said, it may be somebody he's bringing in at night. I don't know. I said, but I wanted to stop. I want to save my marriage. And she said that she would look into it.
But the abuse didn't stop. Ken Douglas molested the women at the morgue at night and on the weekends. Kursker and Maratea continued to assign him to work alone on nights and weekends, and they just did not investigate his behavior.
I wasn't there at nighttime. I don't know what happened, what they did at night.
Ken Douglas says that he abused the women when he was high.
It wasn't like whenever everybody came in, it wasn't like that. It was, I would be, if I wasn't high, I put it like this, if I wasn't drinking, or hadn't had anything to drink when I went to work, it wouldn't happen. Or I would do crack and go in, and I would drink and go in. I wouldn't care. I wouldn't care if I got caught or what. But if I hadn't had anything, no drugs or no booze, no. But when I was under the influence, I really didn't care if I got caught or not.
Aunt Trinette Shirley is the sister of Angel Hicks. She tells us about the family's reaction to what Ken Douglas did to Angel.
Remember when we went to see the body? My mom said, yeah, what? She said, well, I said, what? She said, well, somebody messed with the body. And she said, nobody messed with my baby. No, somebody messed with my baby? And she just broke down and started crying. And so we were all crying. I don't want this to ever happen again to someone else. Not her images of him on top of her. Yeah. Him taking her out the freezer, him getting on top of her, having sex. He's doing whatever he wanted to do to her. It was any kind of way. And nobody could stop. And her eyes was open.
Charlene's older sister, Sandra Williams, tried to protect Charlene from rape as a child and feels guilty she could not protect her from rape in life or after death.
You were sexually abused as a child.
Correct.
And who sexually abused you?
A cousin.
And how old was that cousin when he abused you, and how old were you?
I was 9. I don't know how old he was. He was probably a young man.
I see. And is that something, obviously, that has bothered you over the years?
Correct. And Charlene was actually sexually abused as well. It was me and her both.
I know this is hard to talk about, but you talk a lot about, you know, you're the older sister and you have feelings of guilt because you weren't there to protect her or help her. Correct?
Correct.
You didn't seek professional help at that time, right?
No, not right away. No.
And did you just talk to family or your priest or?
Well, we comfort one another, my family. We talked about it.
Grief educator Dr. Steve Sunderland has been appointed by the United States District Court in Cincinnati, Ohio, to serve 3 special masters in cases involving abuses at the Hamilton County Morgue.
The 3 big themes that these 3 families face are, first, the reality of learning about this rape after their deceased loved one had died. This has formed a kind of shock and trauma to them that is indescribable. It's not something that there's any language to really describe. It becomes an atrocity for them. It fosters an inability to even think about why did this happen, why wasn't it stopped, all of these questions that can never be answered. An example of shock, I can look at any family member, but I would look at in the Range family, Linda, a daughter who had known the deceased and the rape very well. She now feels totally isolated in her home. She really has a hard time talking about it. She can't talk to her husband about it. She feels so traumatized that she can't find the words or the strength to talk about this particular trauma. The second one has to do with the fact that this has had an aftershock. This learning about this terrible incident has destroyed the families. These 3 families are families that have worked together, have come together about other problems which have involved grief as well, including deaths in the family. They have seen each other as very strong supporters of each other. But in each of these 3 families, they now are isolated. They're now disrupted. They cannot look at each other. They feel embarrassed and shameful to talk about this issue. They feel reluctant to go to counselors outside the family. They feel like they have become pariah. They have become outside the normal helping concepts inside the family and outside. So they are shattered in that regard. An example of the second theme of isolation in the family is taken in the Hicks family by the older daughter, Andronette, and she has had a traditional role in the family as a person people could lean on. She's a person who people go to in the family, young and old, to really help them deal with problems. And she likes that role. She has felt that that's been a very valuable role. That role is gone now. Because of the betrayal, because of the shock, totally unable to act as in the same role of a family guide, a family mentor that she did before. The third major impact on people, which is seen in all 3 of the families, can be traced back to the betrayal of of the coroner's office. And this has come in such a surprise, in such a shocking way, in such a sense of betrayal, that they are now isolated in their grief. Their grief is stalled. It may be permanently stalled. My sense is, in 12 of the 14 people, it is permanently stalled, that they will not recover. Michael is an interesting example of betrayal and the impact of betrayal on the personality of an adult in these three families. He's articulate about the damage that betrayal has caused him. He's a health professional at Children's Hospital. He understands how important it is for people when they come to a hospital.
Been stopped, these women would not have been abused.
The families of the three victims are suing Hamilton County because their loved ones' bodies were in the custody of the morgue.
This is a time when you really do expect that the county will hold your loved one safely. And here this additional abuse happened on the county's watch by a county employee. And that's just terrible.
It wasn't only corpses. A morgue employee who worked with Douglas testified that he would bring live women in at night and have sex with them. This is the fourth time the county has been sued for failing to protect bodies in the morgue. The county could have another multi-million-dollar lawsuit on its hands. We reached out to the county for comment, and they say is what happened to her and at least two other women after they were killed.
I do remember going in the freezer, pulling in one of the rooms in the back.
Okay.
Yeah. What happened? I had sex with her.
Kenneth Douglas admitted to sexually assaulting Appling's daughter Charlene, Angel Hicks, and Karen Range during his time at the morgue in the 80s.
I would just get on top of them and pull my pants down.
These crimes did not come to light until years later. It was not until 2008 that DNA from the victims was linked to Kenneth Douglas. He was indicted, pleaded guilty, and was sentenced to 3 years in prison. But even then, Hamilton County had a hard time explaining it.
No one could have imagined.
Job.
If I wasn't drinking, I hadn't had anything to drink when I went to work, it wouldn't happen. Or I would do crack and go in, and I would drink and go in.
And even he isn't sure how many corpses he abused.
But it could be as many as 20.
It could be 100.
One of the family's attorneys, Al Gerhardstein, says that the county ignored the warning signs.
The county had plenty of notice that Douglas was coming to work and was present at work while he was under the influence of alcohol. Turns out he was also taking drugs. And he told us in deposition, I wouldn't have done any of this if it hadn't been for the alcohol and drugs. So had he...
Tonight, Hamilton County is facing a federal lawsuit over the sexual acts of an employee who worked in its morgue.
Now, you expect that the bodies of murder victims entrusted to the coroner's office for autopsy would be safe and protected.
But there's a former employee who's in jail right now for sexually abusing corpses. And now, years later, the families of the victims want relief. We have exclusive video to show you given to us by the victim's lawyer, who claims the county ignored numerous warning signs. And we want to warn you, some of it is quite graphic.
It's like a zombie. You just don't have no feeling, just don't know what to do.
James Appling is talking about his murdered daughter. But what made him feel that way?
Imagine this.
Douglas's wife claims she called the morgue supervisor about her husband smelling like alcohol and
I told him, I said, we're down to one car. More often than not, I'm dropping Kenny off and I'm picking him up. And I'm taking him home. He gets undressed and he reaches up.
Appling's attorney put it in terms that we can use on TV.
Her husband was also coming home from work, as she put it, smelling like sex.
Douglas's wife claims the morgue supervisor told her to stop calling.
Bertie said, Pat, whatever happens on county property and county time is county business.
Douglas says he committed these crimes because he was under the influence of drugs and alcohol on the